An armed standoff between federal agents and members of the public in Nevada comes to a peaceful conclusion for the time being. We're going to look at it today and tomorrow. This is the voice of resistance.
Standing for truth in the four corners of America. Fighting for justice on the frontiers of the culture wars. And turning resistance into an art form. Randall Terry.
What has just happened in Nevada, in my opinion, is one of the most alarmingly and grossly underreported stories in many years. Federal agents, we don't know how many, but we know there were at least dozens, had guns drawn, pointed at civilian protesters. Civilian protesters, some who claimed to be members of the militia, had approached federal agents bearing sidearms. Members of the so-called militia from various areas made statements that they were not afraid to shoot federal agents. There was literally an armed standoff in broad daylight. ABC Evening News didn't cover it. CBS didn't cover it. NBC didn't cover it. CNN, in fact, go ahead and put up the CNN quote. Look at this headline. This makes me wonder if the people at CNN are mentally incapacitated. Clive Bundy's ranch, U.S. government ends Nevada ranchers' illegal cattle grazing. That's not what happened. That's the exact opposite of what happened. So this is outrageously sloppy journalism. The New York Times has not done a story on it. The Washington Post has not done a story on it. The Los Angeles Times has not done a story. I can't even find a story from the Associated Press. So as we go forward in today's program, I promise you that we have done everything we can to give you as many accurate facts as possible. Because whether, as much as I have an agenda for life and liberty in this country, it's my duty as a broadcaster to have integrity, to bring you the facts. So let's begin with what a part of the statement that came from the U.S. Bureau of Land Management. Quote, based on information about conditions on the ground and in consultation with law enforcement, we have made a decision to conclude the cattle gather because of our serious concern about the safety of employees and members of the public. That was from Neil Corns, the director of the U.S. Bureau of Land Management. So, what we know for sure as we begin today's special coverage of an unthinkable powder keg, what we know for sure is this: the federal government backed down. Federal agents, armed agents, put it in reverse and backed up. They released all the cattle and they went home. Now, before that happened, it got pretty tense. Let's roll that footage showing the people approaching the law enforcement.
You're gonna have to arrest us all or shoot us all!
The crowd is now moving forward toward the barrier. The police have been telling everybody they are going to shoot if we don't move back. People are moving forward with their hands in the air, holding flags with both hands in the air. It's a mixture of people on foot, as you can see, people on foot and cowboys.
All right, so now I want to tell you, I have watched an awful lot of footage from cell phones on the ground because there has been very little good footage from professional media. I personally have not heard any footage of agents saying that they would shoot protesters. I'm not saying it didn't happen, okay? I'm not saying it didn't happen. Maybe somebody on one of their little speakers with those vehicles said, if you people don't get out of here, we're going to fire. I can't imagine that. I can't, but it is possible. It is possible. I just haven't heard it. What we know for sure is that it was a powder keg, and the loss of life, both of federal agents, employees, ranchers, law enforcement of what divisions we don't even know, it was a very likely possibility. And certainly there would have been the loss of life of civilians. We're going to look at a lot of things today. Who knew what this all means, what it means for the future. There's a lot here. We're going to show you footage of the federal agents tucking tail and leaving. This is, again, a grossly underreported story. And this story could have as much impact on us in the long run as Waco, the destruction of the Branch Davidian compound and the loss of over 70 human lives there, the horrific killing up on Ruby Ridge, where Randy Weaver's wife and his son were killed. What happened in Nevada could have as much of an impact on us as those two incidents, but perhaps in a very negative way. I'll explain more when we come back. This is the Voice of Resistance.
You have two choices. I mean, you can try to raise your children by design, or you will raise them by default. There are no perfect parents. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. If we have a plan, we've got a better chance of getting it right in the long run.
There is something deep within the heart of every human being that longs for parental acceptance and approval. When does a boy become a man?
Get a group of guys around and ask them that question.
I don't think there's a certain age. Some men stay boys their whole life.
I would say, 16, 18 years old?
Wow, that's a good question.
When they get bar mitzvah?
Well, I think when he has a child. So I just became at 56, 56 years old.
Without the power of the Holy Spirit changing us and giving us power over our sin, we can't hope to be the dads that our kids need us to be.
I have been a leader in the pro-life movement for 30 years. And sadly, we have not prevailed in our goal to make it a criminal act to kill an unborn baby. There's reasons why we have failed. I wrote this book, A Humble Plea, to Catholic bishops, to evangelical clergy, and to lay people, explaining where we went wrong and what we have to do to prevail. We've made this available as a PDF online for free. I encourage you to go and download your own copy. Thank goodness that Fox News did in fact cover what was going on in Nevada. It was fairly scant coverage. There was not a lot of the background story, but at least Fox covered it. And I know that many of us in the media world, many of us in Judeo-Christian activist circles are very thankful for Fox News, and I continue to be one of them. Now, we're going to show you some footage in a second, but I want to go quickly over the facts. For those of you who are saying, Rand, I don't even know what Randall is going on here. I don't know what you're talking about. Let me go over briefly some of the facts that we know to be true. Cliven Bundy is a rancher in Nevada, in the southwest portion or southeast portion of the state in Clark County, which does incorporate Las Vegas, by the way. He and his family have been ranching in that area for well over 140 years. They have cows, have cattle that are on public lands. And the Bureau of Land Management grants leases to people, $1 and change per calf and mom, or cow-calf combination. The fees vary from place to place. And by the way, the Bureau of Land Management controls about 245 million acres where they can grant these licenses, these permits for people to graze their cattle or for timber or for mining. This is a very, very powerful bureaucracy when it comes to our resources. And they control about, 700 million acres below the surface. So, the Bureau of Land Management said in 1993 that there was a tortoise out there that was in danger and that Clive Bundy needed to get his cows off the land. Now this is not, by the way, this tortoise is not actually an endangered species. It's, I believe, listed as vulnerable. So much so that the Bureau of Land Management actually euthanized, according to one press report, euthanized a bunch of these tortoises recently. So this is just bizarre. So his family had been there since the 1870s. At some point along the way, these state lands were taken by the federal government. And then the federal government said, you're not going to pay your grazing fees to local government or to county government, which Clive and Bundy says, I'll do. And he's gone to the county and said, here's a check. I'll happily pay the grazing fees to you, but the federal government is not my landlord. It's unconstitutional. This is a federal government land grab. So he's been consistent in what he said, and it's not that he's opposed to paying this fee for grazing on public lands. The county, of course, says, no, we can't take it. We won't take it. And there have been court orders, a couple of them at least, for him to get his cattle off the property. He says, no, my family's been here since the 1870s. I don't even acknowledge you as my landlord. We have ongoing rights to use this property by virtue of the fact that we have been here longer than you and that our family has helped improve this property. And then the federal government says, all right, we've had it. We're coming in. Many reports have said with 200 federal agents, rangers, cowboys to herd up the cattle. They were using helicopters to fly over the cattle to drive them. Now, for those of you who come from a ranching background, you know that this can be really dangerous for cows. I mean, it's 90 degrees out there, and you've got calves and cows running through this desert heat, which could have caused the loss of the life of some of the cows. So this was bizarre. Again, one report said that an agent who did name himself from the Bureau of Land Management said that they only do about 4 cattle roundups a year because of somebody not paying their fees, and it only usually involves a few dozen head. This was 900 head of cattle, okay? They spent $3 million to ultimately pull the plug and say, this is a bad idea, we're not gonna do it. So what in the world is going on here? What in the world would possess the federal government, the Bureau of Land Management, to go and pull this off? We're gonna talk about it, but just think for a minute. They don't deal with illegal immigrants. They don't use the resources to round up illegal immigrants, but they're going to use them to round up cattle? $3 million? I smell a rat. I want to play this clip for you showing the federal government leaving.
I keep ended up on that horse's Go back to Washington! Go back to China! Dad, don't turn your back on us, you big boys with those big guns, aren't you? Oh, you're so tough. You're so afraid. Look at that. What a bunch of bullies. Oh, cow. You got control back with rock.
So you can see this was really tense. There could have been the loss of life. When you have federal agents lined up behind each other in military style with a shield in front of them, training their guns on civilians, they were ready to fire, whether in self-defense or as the provocateurs. Clearly, I think that the agents would have kept their cool until someone on the other side fired first. Thankfully, all of the protesters and the members of the militia and the local supporters all kept their heads and didn't fire. But friends, that could have been a disaster. When we come back again, we're going to look at Ruby Ridge, we're going to look at Waco, the differences here, and what this is all about for us as Americans. Don't go away. This is the voice of resistance. want to have knowledge, wisdom, discernment? If so, you have to read good books on theology, history, books that look at the lives of great men and women. So to help you to become a more effective Christian, a better witness for truth, somebody who can engage in productive conversation that exhorts and edifies those that you speak with, we're going to do something crazy. We're offering you these 7 books for a gift of any size. You just pay for the shipping and handling, and then give whatever gift that you can, and we will send them to you. But just to make it a little bit more crazy, I will send you a second copy of my 3 books, autographed. You can give them as a gift to your pastor or to a family member and help extend truth and justice in the world. This is while supplies last. The town that started the Civil War. I've spoken to you before about that book. If you didn't see that episode, I encourage you to get it. It's about Oberlin, Ohio, and it involves, in part, the story of a federal agent, a federal marshal, if my memory is correct, who went into Oberlin to try and capture, retrieve, and return a fugitive slave to his owner in the South. When some of the men of the town learned that the agent had arrived, within a matter of minutes, they surrounded him with guns and told him, it was either 20 or 40, but it wasn't 3 or 4 guys, who surrounded him with firearms and told him, you're not taking the slave, and you're getting on the next train out of here. And the reason that it's called the town that started the Civil War is because so much of the abolitionist spirit was present in and flowing from Oberlin, Ohio. That's why I say that what happened in Nevada could be more critical to the future of this country than what happened in Waco or what happened in Ruby Ridge. And then let's compare those things. But again, for emphasis' sake, I want you to grasp the full weight of what just happened. Armed federal agents withdrew. Many in the militia will say retreated. Others, speaking more unkindly, will say tucked tail and ran. Whatever way you want to call it, armed federal agents backed down, drove away, holstered their weapons, and went home and left Cliven Bundy and his cattle to continue trespassing on federal land. Now, this is going to have a legendary effect. You have to understand that the militia movements are going to study this. They're going to look at every inch of footage. If they've got any smarts, they will. The federal government, the NSA, the FBI, they will mine every cell phone call, every video that was taken from there and transmitted by cell phone. They're going to look at every square inch, every foot of the I'm talking old analog tape here. They're going to look at every bit of the detail because they can. We know that they're spying on us. All right? We know that they, right now, are gathering all of our cell phone data. We know that they're gathering our computer data. They're going to look at this and they're going to analyze it. And they're going to determine from what happened there, what steps they will take the next time. All right? Whether any of us want to accept this or not, this was a live drill, okay? I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I've got to take another break, and then I'm going to come back, and we're going to talk about this again in tomorrow's program, all right? But this was a live drill. You don't deploy these kinds of assets to take cattle unless you have some other agenda. I guarantee you that there were people in the federal government who wanted to see what would happen. They wanted to see how many people would come. They wanted to see who would come. They wanted to see what weapons they would bring. They wanted to see what kind of order they would maintain in the crowd. They wanted to see who emerged as leaders of the crowd. They wanted to see who the hotheads were in the crowd. They wanted to see who the cool heads were in the crowd. They wanted to know if they could get the public, the militia, the protesters to back down when all of those people saw the armed guards, or rather the armed agents, taking the cattle. This was a live drill, people. This was to gather information. And what the federal government left with, and what the militia and the scanty news reports they came out of there left with, are a lot of questions that are frightening in their possible answers. I'll be right back. This is the Voice of Resistance. Do you want to get America out of the hands of wicked and unjust men and women who are destroying the republic before our eyes, and put leadership back into the hands of righteous men and women so that we don't die as a nation? Well, you're talking about social revolution, and there are rules in social revolution. We can look at the victorious social revolutions of the past, such as the end of slavery, the end of child labor, women's voting rights, the end of segregation, and so much more, and learn from their victories. Look at their actions, their images, their rhetoric, their sacrifices, and their final fruit. We will send you this series that originally cost $129, 7 books for students, 1 teacher's guide, if you'll give a gift of any size and just pay for shipping and handling. Take advantage of it today. One of the greatest joys and passions that I have had for almost my entire life is music. And one of the best times that I had was putting together some albums in Nashville of songs that I wrote. One of the albums is called Dark Sunglasses Day. This is a country album, a lot of love songs and patriotic music. We've made it available to you online, and I hope that you'll go take a listen. You might be pleasantly surprised. You might even find yourself singing along. Those of you who are regular watchers of The Voice of Resistance probably know by now that I'm not a conspiracy theorist, in the sense that I believe that there are conspiracies that are happening, but I'm not looking for them all the time. And the most dangerous conspiracy is the one that's happening right in front of you, okay? And those federal agents that were there, I don't think that they were involved in some known conspiracy with the Obama administration or Homeland Security. I think that the big shots at the top were watching very closely, and they're going to analyze the data. But most of those agents are just good guys. And they were going back to their bosses saying, what are we doing here? I have been personally arrested almost 50 times for protesting and spent over a year locked up. I know that there's a lot of good people in law enforcement that are, quote, just doing their job. Now, another discussion for another day is that those are some of the most damning words of all time. I'm just doing my job, right? Herod's soldiers killing the babies might have said that. The centurion and his men crucifying an innocent man, our Lord Jesus, might have said that. So I'm not saying that that's a valid excuse necessarily, but all of that to say this. When you look at what the federal government has done, fast and furious, NSA spying on us, taking people out of their homes in Boston at gunpoint while they look for terrorists, we have a federal government that's out of control. And we, the people, are going to have to resist and replace this monstrosity as quickly as possible, and hopefully, please God, without bloodshed. More on this tomorrow. God bless you.